also reassuring him. In fact, you know the rule, youngin, is whatever you bring to drink, you need to start sharing. So, but I'll settle for a cup of coffee. But see, what she's doing is she's reassuring him. We dislocate our shoulders to pat ourselves on the back and reassure us that as a Christian, we're doing okay. Now, I'm not going to go around and hold a survey. I can only tell you from my own life. I find it very easy to tell myself I'm doing okay when it comes to walking in my relationship with Jesus Christ and neglect the things of God in the process. We all are very practiced at doing it and lying to ourselves. What's Proverbs say? All the ways of a man are right in his own eyes. So, Jesus here in Matthew 6 starts addressing this behavior. Starts addressing the behavior of a hypocrite. Now remember, I said earlier that the early leaders of the church in the synagogue, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, they were the leaders. But that's you and me today. We are the leaders in God's family, bringing others to the hope of God. How are we doing? Jesus starts out and he says, take heed. In other words, think about how you're living your life to God. Think about it. Ephesians 5 tells us to walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. In other words, consider your life of how you're living your life and what you're doing. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. All right, now I'm going to stop right here because the rest of this message is not going to be about giving. But it is going to be about living a life demonstrating God's love to other people. Being an encouragement to them. Going out of your way for them. Checking on them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. That word Father is the same Hebrew word for parent. It's not Abba. It's Parada, which is the word for parent. So your parent in heaven is not going to reward you for bad behavior. What it boils down to, if I may transliterate that. He's not going to reward you for bad behavior. We all have this vision of grandeur of when we go to heaven. Man, we read Revelations 4 and 5 and we talk about, we sing about these pearly gates and these streets of gold and how wonderful it's going to be in heaven. But you know, I don't know what it's going to be like for me. The only thing I do know is that I'm not going to be in hell. I don't know what it's going to be like in heaven. I know that much of what it's like is determined by how I live my life. Whether I live as a hypocrite or I live as a true child of God that has a passion and desire for Jesus Christ and to follow Him. Verse 2. Therefore, so in other words, because of what Jesus has said in chapter 5, and when he says to take heed or think about your behavior, because my Father's not going to reward bad behavior. He says, therefore, when you do a charitable deed. In other words, when you live your life demonstrating God's love, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do. In other words, here's the first thing we need to understand. There's three things in this chapter that we need to understand quickly, because I'm running out of time. Three things that are going to determine whether we are living a life of a hypocrite or we are truly living a life as a child of God. The first one is how we are giving of ourselves, not just money, how we are giving of ourselves in the love of God. Now, folks, let me say this. We so often, when it's said giving of ourselves, we so often determine our giving by whether we help with things. Like Rick needs help to put those shelving and those grills together for the Munch Lunch program that we're involved with. You know, that's great, but that's not the only kind of giving. Helping with VBS is not the only kind of giving. When we're going to the Creation Museum and helping with that, that's not the only kind of giving. Coming here to worship God is giving of yourself to God to glorify God. That is giving. Coming on Wednesday nights and praying on Sunday mornings, that is giving of yourselves to God. It's not just about money. It is not just about money. It is about, I don't know any other way to say it. It's getting off our padded hind ends and making the effort, although it may be a painful effort, making the effort to come here and worship the one who created us, the one who made it possible for us to not spend an eternity in hell. Please don't tell me you cheapen it by saying, well, I'm watching worship at home on YouTube. Man, they've got wonderful services on Channel 9 or Channel 5 or whatever channel of the 200 and some channels that you may be getting, which, by the way, don't ever tell me you can't give to God's ministry and have cable TV at home. Don't ever do it. Or a cell phone. Or smoke cigarettes. Or any of those things. You hear what I'm saying to you? Man, it's so messed up. So Jesus is saying, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. In other words, that they may be recognized. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when? Now, I would suggest that you circle this word when, because it is an indicator of behavior or habit. Throughout this chapter, when the word when is used, it's an indication of behavior or habit. So in verse 2, the habit is, I'm going to toot my own horn so I can get immediate feedback and get acknowledgement for what I'm doing. Let me tell you, what you're doing is not going to keep you out of hell. It's not going to keep anybody out of hell. Don't make that mistake. You giving somebody the Romans road does not keep somebody out of hell. It is the condition of our heart and how we allow God's love to flow out of us and how we give ourselves to God in order for that to happen. Verse 3, but when you do a charitable deed, in other words, when you behave and give of yourself to demonstrate God's love, Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. In other words, don't make a big deal out of it. That your charitable deed may be in secret. And your Father, your dad, who sees in secret, will himself reward you openly. God blows your horn for you. Now, quite frankly, I think I'd rather have God blowing my horn. Wouldn't you? I think I'd rather have God blowing it than me trying to toot my own horn. Verse 5. And when you pray, now we're off to another one now. Pray. Remember, the word when is a indication of a behavior or habit. When you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Nothing annoys me more than somebody who's asked to pray that has to spend 3 hours writing out a paragraph so they can read it and claim it as being a prayer lifting up their hands to God. Man, I tell you what, I want to step back because the lightning's got to be coming. Why God is so tolerant and merciful of us, because we have made such a sham of our relationship with God. We are a bunch of hypocrites. We can't blame anybody for not being here because we don't give them reason to be here. Now I say be here. I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm talking about congregations in general. There's no reason for them to be here. Verse 6. But when, again that word when you pray, when you're in the habit of talking to God, go into your room, and when you shut your door, pray to your Father, again parent, who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. My goodness. Folks, prayer is not something that there should be a showy manner of. Prayer should be something intimate that you spend time pouring out yourself to God. Now, that doesn't mean that God doesn't know it. But let me tell you something. It is such a healthy thing relationally to pour yourself out to God. I don't know if you've ever done it before. I don't know if you've ever gotten off by yourself and just poured yourself out to God to where you felt like a wet dish rag when you were all done. But that's what this is talking about. Jesus is saying, do this in secret. Now, there's nothing wrong with praying publicly. There's nothing wrong with opening. I do it at every council meeting. But I also spend a lot of time praying before I ever go to the council meeting, because I don't want to open my mouth and say words that are influenced by my humanity that wants the council members, whoever's there, to look at me. I don't ever want that to happen. What I want is God to be glorified. I wish we had time to go through the rest of this where we talk about the Lord's Prayer, what many call the disciples' prayer, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. We just don't have time to go through that today. I may go back up to that next week. Unless y'all want to stay here till the piano recital. That'd be a good way to get everybody here. Yeah, is just go right on through. But I'd like for you to drop down to verse 16. And this third section is of fasting. 16 through 18 is talking about fasting. And we have a misconception of fasting. And again, westernized Christianity has caused this misconception of fasting. They have made this a negotiation with God rather than what it really ought to be. You heard people say, well, I'm fasting for God to be giving me a new car. Or I'm fasting that God will help me with this decision on what I need to do. Or I'm fasting about this, I'm fasting about that. Well, number one, if you're telling people you're fasting, then you're really not fasting. You're being hypocritical about it. Nobody but God needs to know that you're fasting. If you got to be fasting to talk to God about giving you a car, then you're negotiating with God. You're not trusting that God's going to meet your needs. Fasting has nothing to do with making things happen. Verse 16. Moreover, again, the word when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites. There's that word again. Do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Now, I'm going to stop right there. Remember I just said that if you got to be telling people you're fasting, you're not fasting, you're a hypocrite. What's this say right here? What did Jesus just say? He just said, stop showing off that you're fasting. That's what he's saying. He's saying, stop making a show out of it. All you're doing is embarrassing me. You are tarnishing who I am to others. Verse 17, but when you fast, anoint your head. In other words, get your hair straightened up. Wash your face. For those of you men, shave. Get yourself cleaned up. Shave. Wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Are you catching this trend here of being in a secret place? Hypocrites need to show off. A true child of God that is authentic in their love for God does it quietly and in secret. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things about fasting. And we're going to celebrate communion here. Three things that I want to give you. The first one is this. Understand this. Fasting is meant for you to focus on removing things in your life that are stumbling blocks or distractions. You follow me on that? It's things in your life that you get so busy about doing that you've allowed to get into your life that it becomes a stumbling block or a distraction from the things of the Lord. Satan is not that easy to identify at times. There are times that he puts things into your life that he does it very slowly, with subtlety. And you don't know that it's there tearing your life down till the damage is done. And the whole idea behind fasting is, again, being still before God stop battling yourself and allowing God to expose those things. That's what James talks about when he says, count it all joy. How many of you get excited when hard things happen to you? But see, we should. We should all be excited when hard things happen to us. Now, all of you are looking at me like, really? How am I supposed to get excited when hard things are happening? You get excited because of the truth of God that we are forgetting about and the sovereignty of God. Number one, God is sovereign. Number two, God said, I will meet all your needs according to his riches and glory. Number three, Jesus said, my Father already knows what your needs are. Right? Okay, there are some times that we don't have enough sense to get out of our own way. And as a result of that, God needs to get our attention to say, wait a minute. You've got this in your life and it's keeping you from me. Slow down here. You're focusing on this and it's keeping you from me. Computer breaks down. I got to buy a new computer. I can't believe this. I got to buy another computer. So you go somewhere else and start shopping for a new computer. And maybe what God's saying is, get off the computer and spend that time with me. Spend that time with me. But God, I don't know how. Well, you've got time to open up the Bible and learn. You've got time to open up a devotional and learn. Oh, of all things, it's bizarre. You've got time to go to Bible study on Wednesday night and learn. Number two, fasting, in the biblical definition of fasting, is there to kill off or to deny the appetites that poisons our souls. It is meant to kill off or deny the appetites that poisons our souls. In other words, it's time to deal with sin. Let me tell you something. I cannot imagine being still before God and having sin linger in my life. It's going to come to the surface. And the Holy Spirit, because all the Holy Spirit focuses on are the things of God. And you be still before God, God's going to point these things out. We should be excited about that. We should get excited because it's evidence that God is at work in your life. Don't worry about it getting figured out. Because you see, if God's going to let it happen, he's going to walk you through it, and he's already got a plan at the end of it. Jeremiah 29:11, God promised, he said, I've got a plan for you. He basically said, I know what I'm doing. He promised us in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. That means the hard stuff too. You can go through it all. One of the hardest things that Robin and I have gone through in the last few years is resigning from the church in California. Moving back here. I don't have time to get into all of it, but I mean, it was frustrating. We still owned a house here. The whole time we were in California trying to sell that house. We couldn't sell it. And the value of the house kept going down and down and down. I think at one point in time, the realtor that was handling the house here said, Steve, you cannot afford to sell it now. The value of the house, the appraisal value, has dropped I think it was like $86,000. You can't sell it. unless you want to lose that money. But you know, the amazing thing is, we had a place to go to. I can remember moving back here. Pulled the moving van right up in the driveway. We were able to just unload the next day and right back in the house. We get so upset about being unhappy rather than rejoicing because our life isn't determined by happiness. You follow me on that? Our life should be determined by our joy in the Lord, not by the happiness of how things make us feel around us. So, we fast to deal with the stumbling blocks. We fast to deal with the appetites of our humanity that eat our souls up. And the third thing is simply to humble us. It's simply to humble us. Gentlemen, if you all want to come up here.